potential staple crops from the forest garden. We still grow a lot of annuals, and I'm going to talk a bit more about this later as well. But this one is really potatoes that grows on trees, but it's even better nutrition-wise, more minerals, and it's also being absorbed by the carbohydrates are absorbed better by the stomach. It's not this sugar rush that you get from potatoes. It's a slow release carbohydrate from these chestnuts, so they're really interesting nutrition-wise, and you don't have to dig or anything. They're just going to grow forever.
Sorry, just a clarification. Was it? This is the dentata and the mollissima is the Chinese American.
Yeah, it's exactly, and that's they crossed in the Chinese because the dentata is really susceptible to this chestnut blight, and the Chinese is resistant usually to that. So the dentata is basically wiped out in North America. So they only grow these hybrids nowadays, more or less. And speaking about, before we leave, the big project, Putmira, a bit about establishment here. When we work on the scale, where were you? You were planting 1 hectare of, there you are, yeah. It's just a black face. You're going to plant 1 hectare of trees, and I have a feeling that many of the Finnish projects are quite large scale too. In Sweden it's mostly home garden scale, which I'll get back to as well. But the way we now establish this, if we think back to the forest as a model, like a typical deciduous forest, leafy tree dominated forest will drop about 500 grams per square meter of litter of different types, mostly leaves, dead leaves in the fall, but also these shells that are on the buds in spring. They fall off, small twigs, branches, so on. That's 500 grams per square meter per year. And there's another at least 200 grams per square meter from dead roots, the fine hair roots that are dying off all the time. Could be more, and there's a lot of other stuff happening in the soil which are hard to quantify. But let's say it's around about 1 kilo of biomass, that's dead biomass that's being accumulated in a deciduous forest ecosystem. And on a garden scale, it's really easy to add that every year. And if you want a fast forward succession, which is of course what you want, you don't want to wait for 100 years to harvest, you want to harvest within 3 or 4 years, you can add a lot more than that. If you have a 100 square meter garden, or forest garden, and you want a fast forward succession, you can add a few kilos of dead biomass every year to kind of kickstart the system, no problem. But if you work on 1 hectare and just want to emulate what's happening in the forest, we would need 3 or 4 truckloads of leaves every year, and there's no way to get them from, because it's mostly a coniferous forest around us. Even if we wanted to import that, it would be really expensive. So we had to find ways of nature kind of creating its own leaf litter at a higher rate than would be in an ordinary forest garden setting, basically, you can say. And I didn't have I realized it yesterday when I was sitting with this presentation that I need a picture on that so you understand. So I have to kind of wave with my hands now. It's just kind of a detailed picture. But what we do is that we plant the desirable species in these net baskets, and that's because we have tons of walls. And we're surrounded by grassland, and that's being cut once a year. And when that's being cut, all the walls come to us. And 2 years ago, when a year ago, after this very snowy winter, when we had over 1 meter of snow in the forest garden, and the walls were kind of doing whatever they wanted, no predators could get at them. We lost 100 apple trees. We lost a few plum trees. In total, about 200 trees and shrubs were lost just to voles. And then from the top we had the rabbits and the roe deer and even moose eating away on the trees. So we lost a lot of plants simply. So now we've kind of created Fort Knox. Instead, we put up a deer fence around it, which works really nice. Suddenly we have plants which still have the shoots from last year. We're not used to that. We have like 6-year-old melanchier trees or shrubs. They're like this tall because that's how tall the net was. And then the roe deer always eat them back to this level. We get fruit every year, but they should be 5 or 6 meters tall by now. So it's going to be interesting to see how fast they sprout. And we try to keep out the voles now, or at least defend ourselves against the voles using these net baskets. And that's galvanized steel quite expensive. The size of the holes is 12.5 millimeters, which is important to know because if you make them bigger, the holes can get through actually. And I was really reluctant to using this kind of material, galvanized, because it doesn't decay very fast. Until I found an interesting scientific study from Spain where they tried to establish young oak trees in a rodent-infested area, and they used these net baskets and came back after 10 years and looked at the root systems. And I thought the roots would get strangled by this galvanized steel, but the roots are so strong they just make them explode basically. There's nothing left. After 10 years the metal decays and the roots are so strong they can just make it pop open, so there's no problem. And then of course the rodents can come in and eat those roots, but you have kind of the heart of the root system is protected from rodents, so they won't fall over. They might not grow as fast as they would if there weren't any voles, but this kind of feeding that the voles do on the outside of the root system doesn't seem to damage the trees very much. Yes?
How large is the basket? I mean, how deep does it go?
It goes down, like if the container for the plant is this, we add another 5 to 10 centimeters and fill that with soil from the spot, just to get a good connection between the soil within the basket and outside the basket. So the basket's not supposed to move at all once we're done planting. So we use a lot of water. We also have a bottom in the net basket. So there's a bottom piece, a square bottom piece, and then a net around. And it also sticks up, like you can see here, which makes it really easy to mulch around this. The mulch kind of can pile up against the net.
So it's only open on top?
It's only open on the top, and the water voles, or whatever they're called, they only move in the soil, at least when they're hungry. They migrate, the young ones migrate above the soil, but when they kind of are stable in one place, they move under soil, so they're not a problem. But then we also add, and I didn't have a picture on that, but we also add these plastic nets around the stems of the trees to defend against the other voles which live above ground. Because we have to realize when we create a forest garden from scratch basically, where there's no established trees, grassland, that's still the most common way of establishing a forest garden, we're creating the perfect habitat for both the vole species that we have. And especially ones that are moving above ground or living above ground, the field voles, maybe they're called, they can do a lot of damage, and they get actually encouraged by this kind of system where we don't cut the grass between the trees, as we don't do that simply, not anymore at least. But that's just one part of the coin, or one part of the story. That's how we protect the species and the plants and cultivars that we really want to be there in the long run as well. Like this is a honeysuckle. We do the same thing with apple trees and the nut trees, and everything that could be interesting for voles we protect in this way nowadays, since last year. But we also, because we can't mulch the entire forest garden, we also plant a lot of trees in between these, really densely, like 1 meter between the trees, sometimes just half a meter between the trees. And we plant fast-growing species like birch. We don't plant that sells seeds, but we plant black alder, Alnus glutinosa. We place this, what's it called, silver maple, potentially, Aster saccharinum. It's not the sugar maple, but the other one. It's a pioneer species in the maple genus, fast-growing. We also plant, in the drier sites, we plant larch, we plant the Siberian pea shrub, which is a nice nursing tree, and we plant them really densely. And that's because once these nets decay, we're still not safe. I've seen apple trees of this size that are ring-barred by animals and killed by rodents and rabbits. So we need to create an environment which is hostile to the voles, and voles don't like big, nasty roots, which are woody. We discovered that. We have one part in the garden. I'll show you up here.
I've been successful with birch cherry. Like I've scared away most by putting sticks of birch cherry around fruit trees for the winter.
Okay.
And so far it is.
Interesting.
I got this hint that they don't like birch cherry.
Oh, okay.
Arno has been doing that for decades.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, cool. up here, it's kind of, it used to be a spruce plantation up in this part of the garden. But there's a lot of other stuff. We took away most of the spruce, we left some of them. There's also salix and aspen in there. And when it's basically the same soil and the same prerequisites. We've never had any vole damage up here. We have apple trees without any protection, and the voles just don't go in there. The only difference there is between this part and that part is that here there's a lot of woody roots in the way for the voles. They can't just, like there's almost like there would be a symbiosis between grass and voles. The grass is so fibrous and nutritious for the voles, they can just kind of plow through, eat their way through the grass and get fuel on the way, while here they can't just plow through and they have to actually use a lot of energy to eat these roots and then spit them out again, which they seem to be doing. And they lose energy, so they just don't go there. So if we can plant out hundreds of woody trees, with nice roots, fast-growing roots, then I think that's our hypothesis right now. At least we can get rid of the voles in this system, or make it much more difficult for them to come into the system. So we've planted, the last 3 years, we've planted about 400 of those trees. We just buy them actually from Finland, small trees. They cost like €1 a piece, something like that. Buy 100 black alders, 100 maples, and so on, and just put them there, and don't give them any care at all. We don't water them, we don't weed, we don't mulch, nothing. They're there, and if they survive, it's good. If not, well, tough luck, it's going to be mulch. And eventually we're going to, of course we have to get in there. Now we're fast forwarding. We know that our target, this shrub forest, is kind of in this direction. And anything that moves us in this direction, kind of this is the right direction in a way. But at some point we have to become a bit more exact when we steer succession to our target. We still know where the target is. So at some point we're going to have to take away those trees, or prune them, or whatever, start fighting them in some way, using them to grow mushrooms or make more mulch or wood chips or whatever. So that's how we work on the large scale.